I feel on the HIV and AIDS front, without going into the detail, that the United Nations has also failed profoundly in a variety of areas around women and children, which is profoundly dismaying. And around poverty generally, the United Nations Development Program, from which we expected so much, hasn't been able to pull things together. And even certainly at the political level, at the Security Council level, at the peacekeeping level, all you have to do is look at what's happening in the Democratic Republic of the Congo to see the limitations on multilateralism, a spirit for which I am a shameless apologist. But it's necessary to confront things frankly, and the failure of the United Nations to step in to protect hundreds of thousands of women mercilessly raped and subject to sexual violence over more than a decade, despite one resolution after another from the Security Council itself, which it then disregards. There's something so profoundly repugnant to that process and the way in which it intensifies the impoverished societies by the diminution, degrading, and terrible, terrible damage to the women of the world. This again makes me feel that there are other forces that must come into play. And the hope of multilateralism is civil society and the networking and the extraordinary pressure which is so often being brought in so many areas on multilateralism. National governments should obviously be giving the lead in questions of poverty. But the poorest of the national governments find that very difficult. It may be possible for a China to make advances, of course, or for India, or for Brazil, or quite possibly for South Africa, depending on the policies which the new president brings into play. But in truth, for the poorest countries in the world, and particularly on this continent, they are so straitjacketed by poverty that even the possibility of cash transfers and social safety nets and the availability of some infrastructure which would protect the most vulnerable from poverty is beyond their financial capacity to introduce. And the hope there is the process of democratization and the insistence at grassroots and community level of the peoples of a continent or a country to demand from their government a much greater commitment than has thus far been shown. And so what is the ultimate hope? Well, if you will forgive this rhapsodic moment, in steps care. And indeed, some others, lesser mortals perhaps, but of notable worth. But CARE I've often thought of as sort of primus inter pares, the organization which gives to the NGO community in this field a tremendous strength. And all of your compensatory interventions, I mean, you're attempting to do at community level and grassroots level, whether it's microcredit or home-based care around HIV or food distribution or the tremendously significant focus on girls and women and girls' education. You just can't imagine. Those of us who are outsiders, we tramp around the community. We see what you're doing and what a difference it makes to people's lives. And in a very real sense, you're compensating at the grassroots for the delinquency and negligence of governments taken all in all, and of multilateralism taken all in all. And I encourage you to continue to do it, because when you elevate it to a higher level, when you take girls and girls' education and you make it a kind of cause célèbre, and it becomes a campaign in which the entire world is gradually invested, this is a tremendous contribution to the struggle for gender equality. I believe, I live in a feminist family, I love it, and I believe to the depths of my being that the struggle for gender equality is the single most important struggle on the planet. You can't continue to marginalize 52% of the world's population and expect to achieve social justice and equity. I'm looking forward tomorrow morning to the panel which my colleague, co-director of AIDS Free World, Paula Donovan, who's here, and I will participate in, because any of these panels which focus directly on gender and the activities which CARE and others are pursuing as models of change are invaluable. So even though everything you do on the ground is invaluable, my message simply is, I beg you to engage in advocacy. I beg you to keep the pressure on. I beg you to recognize that the changes which can be made at the grassroots are of themselves insufficient unless we're able to mobilize the forces that be. I'm going to be 71 years old in 2 days' time. I point out to you that greater love hath no man than to spend his 71st birthday with care. So I want the appropriate reverence for that position.